If you're over 70 and you jump straight out of bed the second your eyes open, I need you to stop doing that after today. Not because uncomfortable. Because of what it's quietly doing to your blood vessels, your brain, and your heart every single morning for years without you ever noticing. Here's part. Most people think the dangerous moments of the day are the big ones. A long walk, a flight of stairs, shoveling snow. But there's a much quieter moment, one that happens before you've even had coffee, that puts more strain on an aging cardiovascular system than almost anything else you'll do all day. And almost nobody talks about it. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. Not because I want to waste your time, but because if I just say the words right now, you'll nod, think, oh, I already knew that, and move on without actually understanding why it matters. And understanding why is the entire point. So stick with me for a few minutes, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what's happening inside your body in the first 60 seconds after you wake up, why that moment becomes more dangerous with every passing year after 70, and the simple, free 3-minute adjustment that protects you from it starting tomorrow morning. I've spent a long time studying how the body changes with age, not from a textbook shelf, but from the kind of research that looks at real people, real mornings, and real hospital admissions. And one pattern, again and again, it's dramatic. It's not something you'd put in a movie. But it might be the single most avoidable mistake older adults make, and almost nobody warns them about it. Before we go further, I want to ask you something, and I'd genuinely like you to answer in the comments. When you wake up in the morning, what's the very first thing you do? Do you, right away, reach your phone? Swing your legs out and stand up almost immediately. Type it below, sit up fast, phone first, straight to the bathroom, whatever it is, because in a few minutes you're going to want to compare it to what I'm about to explain, and I read every comment. Now let's talk about what's actually happening while you sleep, because this is where the story really begins. For 7 or 8 hours, your body has been lying flat. Gravity isn't pulling blood down into your legs the way it does when you're upright. Instead, blood redistributes more evenly, and your heart doesn't have to work as hard to push it around. Your nervous system settles into a slower, calmer rhythm. Your blood pressure in most people actually dips overnight. Doctors call this the nocturnal dip, and it's a normal, healthy pattern. At the same time, something else is happening that most people never think about. You haven't had a sip of water in hours. Overnight, you lose fluid simply through breathing and through normal skin and kidney function. By the time you wake up, your blood is measurably more concentrated than it was the night before, a little thicker, a little less easy to move through narrow vessels. It's not dangerous on its own. It's completely normal. But it sets the stage for what comes next. So picture this. You've spent all night in a low blood pressure, fluid-reduced, gravity-neutral state. And then the alarm goes off, and you do what you've probably done for decades. You throw the covers back and stand straight up. For a 25-year-old, this is nothing. Their blood vessels contract instantly, their heart rate adjusts within a second or two, and blood pressure snaps back to normal so fast they never feel a thing. Their nervous system reflex for this, it's called the baroreflex, fires like a switch. But here's what changes as we get older, and this is the part that most people have never had explained to them in plain language. As we age, that same reflex slows down. The blood vessels lose some of their elasticity. Think of a young garden hose versus one that's been sitting in the sun for 20 summers. It still works, but it doesn't snap back the way it used to. The nerve signals that tell your blood vessels contract now, we're standing up, take longer to fire and longer to complete. Add in common factors that become more frequent after 70, blood pressure medications, mild dehydration, diabetes affecting nerve function, or simply decades of wear on the cardiovascular system, and that split-second adjustment your body used to make effortlessly can now take several seconds, sometimes even longer. And in those few seconds, something measurable happens. Blood pressure drops instead of rising. Blood pools in the legs instead of being pushed back up to the brain and heart. For a brief window, your brain is running on less blood flow than it needs. This has an actual medical name. It's called orthostatic hypotension, a sudden drop in blood pressure upon standing, and it becomes dramatically more common with age. Some research estimates it affects a meaningful percentage of adults over 70, and the number climbs higher in people who are on multiple medications or who have other cardiovascular conditions. You know that feeling of the room tilting slightly when you stand up too fast? The gray fog for a second or two? The need to grab the nightstand or the wall? Most people brush that off as just getting older, as if it's some unavoidable, harmless quirk of aging. It's not harmless. It's your brain briefly running on empty. And here's why this matters so much more after 70 than it did at 50. This is where the deeper damage happens, and it's cumulative, meaning it's not one bad morning that hurts you, it's thousands of them, repeated for years, that quietly stack the risk. Every time this happens, a few things occur at once. Your heart has to work harder and faster than it should, in a rushed, unregulated way. To correct the pressure drop, that's added strain on a cardiovascular system that after 70 often has less reserve capacity to begin with. Your brain experiences a brief dip in oxygen and glucose delivery, and while a single moment is usually harmless, doing this every single day for years is a very different story. And most seriously, that instant of dizziness is one of the leading, most preventable causes of falls in older adults, and falls are one of the biggest drivers of hospitalizations, fractures, loss of independence, and yes, accelerated physical decline in people over 70. This is the connection to aging that most nobody explains clearly. It's not one dizzy morning ages you. It's that repeated cardiovascular strain, repeated mini drops in brain blood flow, and the elevated fall risk that comes with it, compound over years into something that behaves like accelerated aging, more falls, more injuries, more hospital stays, more decline in mobility and confidence, and more stress on a heart that didn't need the extra daily workload in the first place. Now, before I tell you the fix, let's talk about what most people assume the answer, because I guarantee you're thinking of at least one of these right now, and I want to walk through why they're not actually the core solution. Some people assume the answer is just get up more carefully, which is true but vague enough to be useless. Nobody actually knows what carefully means in practice. Some assume the answer is blood pressure medication adjustment, which is a real conversation to have with a doctor, but isn't something you can act on this morning. Some assume it's about sleeping more, which helps overall health but doesn't address the specific mechanical problem happening in that transition from lying to standing. And some people think the fix is compression socks, which can genuinely help in certain medical situations, but they're a tool for managing the problem, not the root fix that costs nothing and takes 3 minutes. The real answer is simpler than all of those, more universal, and something almost nobody structures their morning around, even though it directly targets the exact mechanism we just walked through. The fix, what I'll call the 3-minute wake-up transition. A short, structured sequence that gives your blood vessels, your nervous system, and your blood volume the time they now need, at this stage of life, to catch up before you ask your body to stand and function normally. Here's exactly what it looks like, and why each piece matters. The first minute happens before you even sit up. While you're still lying down, flex and point your feet, make small circles with your ankles, and gently tighten and release your calf muscles 10 or 15 times. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but it isn't. Your calf muscles act like a secondary pump for your circulatory system. Physiologists sometimes call it the skeletal muscle pump. Activating those muscles before you move helps push blood out of the areas where it's pooled overnight and gets your circulation gently moving again, before gravity gets involved at all. The second minute is about rehydrating before you stand, not after. Keep a full glass of water on your nightstand every single night, and drink most of it while you're still lying or just sitting up. Remember, your blood is naturally more concentrated after a night without fluids. Adding water back into your system before you challenge it with an upright position gives your blood volume a head start, which supports blood pressure instead of leaving it to fend for itself. The third piece is the transition itself. Sit up slowly. Then sit on the edge of the bed with your feet flat on the floor for a full 60 seconds, not 5 seconds, not just a quick pause, a genuine minute. This gives your baroreflex, that blood pressure correcting nerve signal we talked about, the time it now needs at this age to catch up and stabilize things before you stand. Only after that minute do you stand up, and even then, stand slowly, holding onto something solid for the first few seconds. 3 minutes. No equipment. No cost. No prescription. And it directly addresses the exact mechanism, slowed vascular reflexes, overnight fluid loss, and blood pooling that makes mornings uniquely risky after 70. Let me tell you about someone this applies to, because I think it'll make this feel real instead of theoretical. I'll call him Frank, a composite of the kind of story clinicians who treat older adults describe often, not a specific patient file, but a genuinely representative picture. Frank was 74, active, sharp, still drove himself to the grocery store and played cards with friends twice a week. One morning, he swung his legs out of bed, the way he had for 50 years, stood up to grab his robe, and the room spun hard enough that he had to grab the dresser to keep from going down. He didn't fall that time, but it scared him enough that he mentioned it to his doctor, who explained exactly what we just walked through. The slower baroreflex, the overnight fluid loss, the blood pooling in his legs. Frank started the 3-minute transition the very next day. He told his doctor a few weeks later that the foggy, tilting feeling had essentially disappeared, and that he genuinely hadn't realized how much that daily dizziness had been quietly making him nervous to move quickly at all, even later in the day. That's a real and common pattern. The fear of falling can shrink a person's whole life, long before an actual fall ever happens. If you've ever felt that same tilt and grab the nightstand moment, comment the word yes right now, because I want to see how many people watching this have been living with this and just assumed it was normal. Now here's a piece almost nobody talks about, and it's the part that takes this from good advice to genuinely useful, because there's a mistake hiding inside the fix itself that can quietly cancel it out. Most people, once they hear drink water before standing, picture one big gulp of ice-cold water first thing. But cold liquid consumed quickly can, in some people, trigger its own brief reflex that affects heart rate and blood pressure in the opposite direction you want. The better approach is room temperature or lukewarm water, sipped steadily rather than gulped. It sounds like a minor detail. It isn't. The entire goal of that second minute is to support a smooth, stable transition, and a sudden cold shock working against a sluggish reflex system can partially undo the benefit you were going for. There's a second detail where you keep that water matters more than you'd think. If the glass is on the far side of the room, you'll either skip it most mornings or you'll get up to get it, which defeats the entire point, since you're now standing before you've hydrated. The water needs to be within arm's reach of the bed every single night, without exception, or this whole routine quietly falls apart within a week. Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this routine can and can't do, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me for 30 seconds. This 3-minute transition is not a cure for anything. It will not reverse existing heart disease, it will not replace blood pressure medication your doctor has prescribed, and it will not eliminate all fall risk on its own. What it does is directly reduce one specific, well-understood mechanism, the sudden blood pressure drop and blood flow disruption that happens when an aging body is asked to go from lying down to standing up too quickly. For some people, especially those with more significant orthostatic hypotension, other conditions, or certain medications, this routine helps but isn't the whole answer, and a conversation with a doctor about medication timing, hydration targets, or compression garments may still be genuinely necessary. If you ever feel persistent dizziness, fainting, chest pain, or irregular heartbeat, not just the occasional brief tilt, that's not a do this routine situation, that's a call your doctor situation, full stop. And about that ages you twice as fast idea in the title, let's be honest about what that really means, because I don't want to oversell it to you. Nobody has a stopwatch measuring your biological age in real time. What the research does show is that things like repeated cardiovascular strain, chronic mild dehydration, and increased fall and injury risk are all associated with faster physical decline and a higher burden on the body over time. Framed that way, ages you faster isn't a magic multiplier. It's a fair description of what years of unnecessary daily strain can add up to. That's the honest version, and I think it's actually more motivating than the exaggerated one, because it's something you can actually act on. Now, the wake-up transition is the main character in this story, but it works even better with a small supporting cast, and each one earns its place for a specific reason. Morning sunlight, even just standing near a window for a few minutes after your transition, helps regulate your internal body clock and has been associated with better sleep quality the following night. And better sleep supports healthier blood pressure regulation overall. A small amount of protein at breakfast, eggs, yogurt, a bit of nut butter, helps maintain muscle mass, which matters because muscle itself supports circulation and balance, both of which reduce fall risk. And if your doctor has you on blood pressure medication, asking specifically whether the timing of that dose relative to when you wake up could be optimized is a genuinely useful conversation, since some medications can influence how pronounced this morning drop feels. None of these replace the core 3-minute routine. They support it. Think of the wake-up transition as the lead actor, and these as the supporting cast that makes the whole performance work. So here's how this actually looks in real life, starting tomorrow. Tonight, put a full glass of water on your nightstand within arm's reach before you go to sleep. When you wake up, before anything else, spend 1 minute doing gentle ankle and calf movements while still lying flat. Then sit up and drink most of that water while sitting on the edge of the bed for a full 6 seconds, feet flat on the floor. Only then, stand up slowly, holding onto the nightstand, headboard, or wall for the first few seconds. That's it. That's the entire routine. It costs nothing, it takes about 3 minutes, and it's something you can genuinely do tomorrow without changing another single thing about your life. But I have to warn you about something, because this is where a lot of people do everything right in the morning and still don't get the protection they think they have. There's a silent saboteur here, and it's dehydration throughout the entire day, not just overnight. If you drink your morning water, feel great, and then go 6 or 8 hours without another proper glass of water, your blood volume drops right back down by early afternoon, and that same orthostatic risk we just fixed in the morning quietly creeps back in every time you stand up from a chair, a couch, or a car seat later in the day. Many older adults underdrink throughout the day, sometimes because the sense of thirst itself becomes less reliable with age. You simply don't feel as thirsty even when your body needs fluid. That means the habit that matters most isn't just a morning event, it's a standing reminder to sip water steadily across the entire day, not just at sunrise. There's a second version of this saboteur too, long periods of sitting without moving. If you do the perfect wake-up routine and then sit in a recliner for 3 hours, blood pools in your legs all over again, and the very next time you stand, you're right back in that same risky transition, just later in the day. Getting up and moving briefly every hour or so, even just to walk to the kitchen and back, keeps that circulatory pump working the way it's supposed to all day long, not only at 7 a.m. Here's the bigger lesson underneath all of this, and I think it's actually the most important part of the whole video. You came here for one specific fix, for one specific moment of the day. But the real takeaway, broader than that. Your body, after 70, needs a little more patience from you than it used to. A few extra seconds here, a glass of water there, a slower transition instead of a rushed one. None of that is a sign of weakness or decline. It's simply what an aging cardiovascular system genuinely needs to keep working well for years to come. The people who tend to stay steadiest, most independent, and most confident in their 70s, 80s, aren't the ones who ignore these small adjustments. They're the ones who make peace with a slightly slower, more intentional start to the day and get all the benefits of stability in return. So let's bring this all together. The number one mistake is standing up too fast after a night lying flat, without giving your slower vascular reflexes and your overnight fluid loss any time to catch up. The mechanism is a temporary drop in blood pressure and brain blood flow caused by an aging nervous system reflex that simply needs more time than it used to. The fix is the 3-minute wake-up transition, ankle pumps while lying down, water while sitting up, 60 seconds on the edge of the bed, then standing slowly. And the two things that can quietly undo all of that are dehydration later in the day and long stretches of sitting still without moving. But there's one more piece of this puzzle I haven't told you about yet, and it might be even more important than the morning routine itself. It has to do with something that happens not when you get out of bed, but when you go from sitting to standing during the day, a moment that trips up even more people than the morning does, for a slightly different reason. That's exactly what we're going to break down in the next video, because once you understand both of these moments, you'll have covered two of the biggest, most overlooked risks of the entire day. If this video helped you understand something about your own mornings, do 3 things for me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, since this really is a 2-part story. Tap the like button, because it genuinely helps this information reach other people your age who are dealing with the exact same thing without realizing it. And leave a comment telling me one thing you're going to change about your morning starting tomorrow. I want to know, and I read every single one, because at the end of the day, Growing older isn't really about avoiding every risk life throws at you. It's about learning, one small habit at a time, how to move through the world a little more gently than you used to, and discovering that gentleness, more often than not, is exactly what keeps you strong.